Hey, welcome and come on in to team meeting where you're more valuable beyond sports because of sports. And today it is my greatest honor to introduce you to the famous Dr. Albert Bimper, who is stalwart Ram and then attended a few other universities and wears a Super Bowl ring. But more than that, he's a stalwart Ram and is currently chief of staff at interim at Colorado State and head of ethnic studies and dual appointed to the athletic department. I think he cooks at the university, parks cars, makes brand new research, that sort of stuff. So I am grateful that you've taken the time to talk to us today.
No, I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
All right. So, we got to start with the hard hitting journalism. First. So what was your favorite travel food? High school, college, or the pros?
Like a meal that we would have when we travel?
Yeah.
Well, it's the same. It's my favorite food all the time. So it's going to be that like Texas style brisket. So
Oh man,
it'll put me to sleep for the night before. So that's why
Oh
I love
yeah,
the
nothing
barbecue.
like dry rub Texas brisket. Oh yeah, awesome. Oh yeah, I could just okay. So what is the funniest thing you heard from an opposing team player or opposing fans, high school, college, or the pros?
Oh, the funniest. Well, yeah, I've heard of some few things. I don't know if they're always funny or just inappropriate. um, a couple ones. So usually when I was with CSU with Colorado State, I was usually one of the shorter offensive linemen, and so that I would often get comments from the defensive line or the defense in general. Just they'd come up and they just ask one question, a one word question. They go, "Really?" and I'm and so but they were talking about my height, so that was usually pretty funny to me. Over time it became funny. At first it wasn't.
Yeah. I hope you really made them pay for it. So
That's right. That's right. But it was funny because usually it was the same thing. They always thought they were clever and they'd say, "Really?" And I'm like, "I've heard you're not the first."
That's perfect. That's perfect. Okay, so you played at Colorado State, but you're from Texas, correct?
Yeah, I'm from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. That's right.
All right. And how did you get into football? Was it the only sport you played or?
No, actually, I grew up playing soccer. My father's from Ghana, and so he didn't really understand the game of football, and so he thought I was too small and I'd get hurt. So, um, I didn't play. I grew up playing soccer, which was a great benefit to
Oh,
me, and
yeah.
I really believe in that sport, even for my kids today,
Oh,
just in terms of not footwork, but
yes.
understanding how your own body works and the mechanics, being an athlete. And so, yeah, I grew up playing soccer, basketball. I didn't start playing football until I got to high school. Um, and yeah, at that point, I had kind of eaten my way out of the soccer physique. It's so with too much brisket, I guess.
Oh no, I don't. There's never an end. So, and you got to CSU. Who were your coaches at CSU?
I played under Sonny Lubick as the head
Oh,
coach.
yeah.
Yes, and so
Okay.
yeah.
All right. That's perfect. That is perfect.
Funny how you asked that question. So today, right, a student athlete in college might have multiple head coaches, and I was fortunate to only have one
Oh,
head coach.
and and a special man. Yeah.
That's right. That's
That
right.
is very odd today. Yeah, that
Right.
is. And that just that hurts my heart a little bit. But okay. So okay. So you and I talked a little bit before, and is why I really wanted to talk to you about the day after eligibility and what that transition is afterwards. Quick note, I'm a big proponent of student athletes and that I believe you're the public within our country that we need to lead us. But What did it feel like going from CSU to, and then you were drafted, correct?
Yeah, I can give a kind of a background there, but yeah, I went undrafted actually. I popped my hamstring my senior year, so I missed several of my senior year games in college, but came back, and then I got picked up as an undrafted free agent to Indianapolis Colts. And so I say I made the league the hard way because they brought in 20 something of us as rookies, drafted and undrafted, and probably only about 8 or 9 of us made it to the first week of the
What
season.
was that like? What was that pressure like?
It's the hardest job interview I've ever been in. So, um, and just mentally, right? Because I didn't have the draft kind of cachet and all that comes with that. But even those guys felt a significant amount of pressure. I guess if you weren't the first round draft pick,
Oh,
uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess so. Yeah.
but I even give it to them, just at different levels of pressure. But for me, I say it was the hardest job interview because every day you didn't know if at the end of practice you'd get a phone call. So I describe it in this way: is I didn't unpack my suitcase
Oh,
um,
nice.
for the entire summer. Like everything was folded. If you walked into my room, and my roommate was the same way, you thought we had just moved in the day before, all summer long. Like, and we folded our clothes. Like my mother would have been so proud. We folded our clothes after after we wore it and washed it and dried, and we put it back in the suitcase because you just didn't know. And
Yeah.
so if you kind of think in that context, it was hard emotionally and mentally kind of draining with a level of stress that I had never experienced before. Uh,
Oh,
and you're an athlete at a high level and you've learned to really manage stress, but this is the job you've wanted your entire life.
yeah. Oh, wow. That's so impressive. Did you, um, what was it like when you made the team? I mean, what did you feel? Was there just relief, or you had a headache, or?
Yeah, I love
Because finally, sometimes
that.
after the relief, you're like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, it is like an emotional kind of relief, like, wow, I'm here. But it kind of never goes away because the NFL is stands for not for long. And so
Oh,
um
man.
it that pressure doesn't there's a little bit of release valve there, but it doesn't go away completely because you can be cut at any point during the season. I was actually cut just a week or two later, and then I was brought back, luckily, back to the Indianapolis Colts. But in the like 2 week time period that I was cut, I had traveled around to several different teams. I was in New Orleans and in Charlotte, and so it just kind of the pressure is always there. At this point in the NFL, which I really appreciate and love the game, I also learned, you'll hear this a lot, the business side of the game
Ah,
that I just had no understanding of. And so at some point, you kind of get used to that level of pressure and that stress, and you learn to just navigate and operate within it. Um, but I guess it just it never went away.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Wow.
entire time I was there. Yeah.
That was, so what was your favorite game in the NFL?
We played the Baltimore Ravens in a playoff game, and well, actually, yeah, actually, that was a good. It's the two playoff games. We played the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore, and that was an exciting time period when Indianapolis used to be in Baltimore, and the
Oh, yeah.
Mayflower trucks left. So we got reminded of that
Oh,
quite a bit. That was an intense city. The city reminded you of that when you got there. So I enjoyed that environment. And then we played the New England Patriots, and by winning that game, we were off to the Super Bowl, and we came back from like a 21-3 deficit at halftime, and so it's Tom Brady on the other side, Peyton Manning. We're down, like the locker room was the quietest locker room I'd ever been in before. Like it was just you just knew what you need to do and go out there and do it, and we came back.
is remarkable. Oh wow, what a life. This is yeah, I can't even imagine that. Okay. That is I was a Bronco fan, so
Yeah.
you know, we like Peyton too, but
There you go.
okay. Um so when we talked about this, the value of a student athlete and all the pressure you were under, but was there anything you missed about being in sports? I mean, do you miss football at all?
I
Playing?
I miss the obviously the camaraderie. I miss the being in the locker room with my teammates and my coaches. I miss the certain level of structure.
Okay,
um,
yeah.
right, maybe not all of it, but I miss a certain level of that. Yeah, and there's I miss probably more than anything. I miss running out of the tunnel for a game. Like that's just a feeling that's hard to recreate.
Oh, yeah.
I try to do it when I run into the classroom and the students look at me a little weird, but I
Oh, that's fabulous. Okay, so the part that there's so many parts that you can help so many people that we talk to is what the I guess the day the call came from the NFL or the last day of eligibility at CSU, what did that feel like?
I'll talk about it hit me that when I was I went to so I'm gonna jump ahead of that if you don't
Okay,
mind.
yeah, please, whatever you want to say, whatever. Yeah.
I essentially felt my time in the NFL, the way I left was I kind of raised my hand and said, I think I have another option. And it was, I had Purdue right up the road, the opportunity to go and be a graduate assistant coach there. And so I thought I was making a good decision that maybe I'll start in this kind of new chapter of my life and I'll go back to school and get my master's degree, start coaching. Um, at this point, it was at Purdue that I was there, and I was working with their athletes. I was a graduate assistant coach. I had my degree from Colorado State. I had a Super Bowl ring, and I'm in grad school, and I felt like I was a failure. Right, and it's like this moment really hit me around identity of like what the game or what I didn't get out of it. And this is not to blame any one person, but yeah, it just hit me as like, why do I feel like I am not enough?
Right.
And every one of my teammates is looking at me like, you're doing it all. And I did not feel like I was enough. Um, and so that just took time, but this was the moment for me that was that separation from football that I was now kind of wondering, well, how do I demonstrate my worth to
Right.
people? And that worth had always been attached to football, attached to being an athlete. And now I just wasn't. But I had many of the accolades from it, but I wasn't still that. Uh,
Right.
but and that just took time. Um, Talking it through and realizing at this point also wasn't the only one that felt like this.
Yeah.
You know, like I felt like this at this moment. There might be another person that feels like that the last day they play their high school game,
Right.
right? Another
Yep.
person feels like this the last time they play their college,
Mhm.
football game or sport, whatever that sport is. Mine just came and really hit me while I'm standing in the weight room amongst these Big Ten Purdue athletes and feeling like I'm not enough. Uh,
Yeah.
but that fueled me, and I had good people in my life at the time, and they helped to kind of channel that energy and channel those questions.
Right.
Suddenly, I became a professor later, but on this work around identity and student
Right.
athletes, yeah, and that's what kind of fueled my passion in a different way.
Um, did you who were the people that you talked to? Were they other student athletes? Were they coaches? Were they mentors of the at the at Purdue? Were they not at Purdue? Or did anyone from CSU or the Colts reach out to you, or how did that
Yeah,
work?
that's interesting. That's a good question. It's an interesting question. I'll tell you who I didn't talk to. Every time you ask a question, I say I'm gonna answer a different way. So I
Okay,
apologize.
fine, fine, fine. Mhm.
Who I didn't talk to, and this was part of the the journey was I couldn't talk to my family, right? I couldn't talk to like my friends that I grew up with. Like that for me was the hardest group to talk to. So I did start to talk to almost like strangers, right? They were the new faculty members at Purdue suddenly,
Okay.
and I'm just like pouring into them, and you know, maybe it was therapy sessions to them, but it was helpful to just kind of share tidbits. I was also
Right.
pretty, I don't want to describe, I wasn't someone that just came out and shared everything.
Right.
But
Right.
I did it slowly at my own pace. But I often did it with kind of strangers and folks that would have my ear that didn't really know anything of my past. I think I was pretty selective in that sense. Like they didn't know much about me, so the most they knew about me was what they saw in front of them at that moment, and it was a blank slate to them, so I could, you know, I didn't feel judged in that way. So
Okay.
that became coaches that I worked with more than coaches that I had played under. Um,
Okay.
and I slowly started to incorporate some of my closest friends, teammates that I grew up with, or that I played at Colorado State, because I was getting to this understanding that I was probably not the only one feeling like this. And if I was
Yes.
feeling like it, so was my guy that was my roommate for the last 4 years. And I didn't realize that he may have been feeling like that. And
Right.
yeah, so if that answers your question, it took me time to be selective of who to talk to. But I did eventually get back home, and I did eventually get back to,
I
you
know.
know, close friends. But that actually took me longer, mainly because their questions of me were usually, "How you doing?" And I felt like this sense of pity. You know, that was probably in my own head, but you know, and they had struggled on what to talk to me about because all they usually talked to me about was football. So our
Yeah.
conversations were shorter, and that was a
Yeah.
struggle.
So when the conversations contract, see, it had been really helpful if you could have called me and my office and said
Yeah,
that all these students, athletes are after their eligibility or their senior year or whatever, were in my office and in my office and it took me a while to understand the pattern. And that's why I'm doing this. It was like, how do I you could have called me, Albert, and
yeah,
said,
should
hey,
have.
this is what they're feeling but they did open up just like you said. And then I was
Yeah,
like, oh, how do I? So then I developed a quiz to help them. And then kind of, they did real well. But, okay. So as the conversations shrunk, is that a good way to say it?
yeah, it's
How,
fair.
how did you help other people? I guess it was your family or it could have been former teammates or how did you help them expand the conversation? Did you have to be able to have gone through these feelings and then want to talk about something else? Or I'm trying to help other
Well,
family members and people and all that kind of stuff.
I had to explain that this is this phrase that I'm more than an athlete. I
Yeah,
had to like educate and teach people that I was more than that. I had more interest than the pigskin. I had more
right.
interest than 10 yards at a time, right?
Yeah,
And folks, I mean, it sounds crazy, but they'd kind of be like, "Oh, I didn't know."
yeah. Wow, you
But
like other stuff,
that goes into this identity is that I saw myself in a particular way, but so did everybody else.
right?
And so until I was able to be honest and tell folks, hey, I have interest in studying this. I have interest in going to graduate school. And as a first generation student, a lot of my family were like, what? You know, and why would you have an interest in going to graduate school? And then what does that mean? So my interest then took me into places that they didn't have any like knowledge or experience in, so they had less and less questions that
Yeah.
made
Okay.
often would make others feel a little insecure because suddenly my opportunities took me into certain spaces that allowed me to expand,
Right.
but that took me away sometimes from others that didn't have those experiences.
Right.
Does that make sense? So
Yes, it does.
um,
It's really well said. Yes.
So
Yeah.
as I expand and can articulate my new interest, I had to also educate others on what those interests were, why I had these sudden, to them it was suddenly, and some of them were like I
Right.
was just being exposed to more. But and I would have confidence in saying, I like going to grad school, or I like studying this. I
Right.
mean, even now, like this is really, I'm a professor, an administrator by day, and then I go to my, we live north of town, north of Fort Collins, and in a much more rural community in Wellington, and I raise cattle and chicken, and these are just because I've expanded, right?
Right.
uh,
Right.
and so that's just my example. Like my interests have changed over time, and they've grown, they've evolved, and that was sometimes difficult for even the closest people around me. They had not seen those sides of me.
Right.
um, and so it just took time. It just took time.
Yeah. And anytime you expand, you end up challenging the people around you. You know,
Yes,
if you
yes.
got an undergraduate degree and they didn't, there's some challenge.
And I
Uh,
didn't want them to feel less than
oh
me
yeah,
at all.
yeah.
Like that's
It's
not the
just it's
yeah.
your curiosity and you moving forward, but somehow it seems to change a lot of conversations, and people know you by what you do or your hobbies or whatever, and then they don't know. So I'm trying to help student athletes talk about other things or prepare themselves as they go to include other people besides.
Yes,
I had two of my basketball players that started running golf tournaments.
exactly. Yes.
I was like, it was still sports, but that's a kind of a difference.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to do that. That was just some really, really great stuff. So, okay. Um, what would you tell today the 19-year-old Albert Bimper?
Oh man. Great question.
You can answer it another way.
Yeah. I love that. No, I'm taking that one.
Okay.
I'll answer it. No. What would I tell the 19-year-old Albert Bimper? I guess sounding a little bit cliche or trite is expose yourself to things, and don't be apologetic that you tried something different. Uh,
Okay. That's
yeah.
really good. Okay. I knew this was gonna be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, if you're working with student athletes now, and we see them kind of move into that eligibility day, the end of that, is there something you tell them, or you'd like to tell them, or you'd like to see other athletic departments do, or I just because the student athletes ended up in my office, I'm trying to solve this, trying to help how this ends, because it appeared to me that everyone was looking at them, coaches, nutrition, academic advisors, all this, and then kind of the day that ends, it's like it gets a little quiet.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
uh and that's what, that's where we ended up, and we did some great things with them, and they're awesome people. But um is there something you would add or you have done that's successful or something?
And I would tell them my comment earlier around like one of the things I miss the most is running out of the tunnel. Um, I miss the competitive spirit of things, and so we got to find a way to compete in other arenas.
Okay.
And the best days of these young athletes still lie in front of them, right?
Yeah.
Like your best championship, the best game you played in, the best practice you ever had, the best play you ever made. There's still a better day in front of you, and it's your job to go find that in what arena that will exist in. But that's going to require you to not be afraid to ask that or to say you don't know. It's going to require you to ask for help. It's going to require you to be a little bit more vulnerable and say, I am willing to humble myself and learn this new craft, and I'm gonna work hard at it because I've worked hard in other arenas,
Right.
right? I'm gonna work
Yeah.
really hard at it, but I'm gonna humble myself and be a freshman, a sophomore, junior
Right.
again in a
Yeah.
different industry, so
Right.
that one day they will. this is what I tell them. They'll call your name as a first round draft pick, but for a very different arena. It might
Right.
be for a business. It might be for the chief of staff of a university. It might be whatever it is. They're going to call your name again because the best days are still ahead of you. And so it's going to take time, but it's going to take a work ethic, and it's going to take the work ethic of an athlete that really wants to be the best. That means they have to work for it.
Wow, that's really good. Yes, that's true. I've in my other interviews and that sort of thing, so the question is, if when you look back on your practice, what you excelled at in practice or in a game, do you still use some of those disciplines, strategies, thought process in your career or parenting?
Yeah, absolutely. um, there's I still I don't know, I still show up early to things, right? I still have the mindset of and I say that like show up early means if I'm on time, I'm late. Like I still have that mindset to not being late to
Yeah.
meetings. Sonny wouldn't allow us to wear hats in the building. This
Yeah.
might have just been brought up because Deion Sanders down
Yes.
the road just made this comment in his opening speech to his team, and that it's not that the hat itself is the most important thing, but it represents a certain respect of the environment that you're in, and so I still think of that, and yeah. My kids, I yell at them for the same thing.
That's
Uh,
perfect.
so those little tiny things, if that's what you're at, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I do think about those.
Yeah, I do understand that. Um uh do you what is next for you? Where do you see yourself in 5, 10 years?
Oh, what's next? I've really enjoyed my role administratively on campus, and so meaning not only as a faculty, but being in administrative roles that help to kind of create policy and make decisions in certain ways that affect the lives of the students on our campus and the access for students on our campus. So I see myself kind of pursuing and continuing in that space. I don't know exactly what role that might lead to, but aspirations of being a dean of a college or even higher, right?
Okay.
Folks that know me know that you know there have been some university presidents here that I've really admired, and so I don't know if the
Mhm.
presidency is exactly that, but having the level of impact that those folks have had on a really large system of higher education, I'm interested in finding in my path towards that.
I have every confidence in you. So I have a question. You played offensive line, correct?
Yes.
So do you think that part of this time that you were strategizing or kind of protecting, or you were to make the action go forward versus the defense, do you think that has any impact on your career today? That you spent so much time thinking about that it was kind of became a part of you?
I think about my role as an offensive lineman for the if anyone that watches this is, it might be an offensive lineman. Like in a game, an offensive lineman plays the entire time, most of the time,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Versus like a lot of other positions go in and out in
Uh-huh.
the game. And so what requires you is not only a certain level of stamina, right? But it's also the ebbs and flows of the game, right? And the times which you'll make a mistake, you got to get back in there and run another play.
Right.
You can't hang on the bad things too long, but you can't hang on the good things too long either, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because you got to
No
run another
kidding.
play. So you've got to
Yeah.
learn how to play at a pretty kind of even keel and not get too down or get too up. And so
Yeah.
I think about that role as an offensive lineman of how to manage the stress levels and understand the ups and downs of the seasons that we're in and in my job. Like those things give me some level of calmness in times of stress for others, right? Um,
Yeah.
so
I
as an
never thought about you were on the field all the time.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're on the field all the time. And again, you make a mistake, you get a flag, you give up a sack, whatever it is. I didn't give up sacks, but you
No, I get it. Yeah.
yeah. So you've got to turn it around, and you got to have a little bit of a short-term memory that doesn't hamper you for the next play. And that's how I kind of think about the work I do.
Oh, yes. What do you, are your kids playing sports?
Yes, my kids all play soccer. But yeah, I've got three, 11, 8, and 5 right now, boy, girl, boy. My two oldest play competitive soccer, and they're doing really well. My oldest is at like a state level. He's doing well, and he
Nice.
also they also run track, and so they are sprinters. They're not offensive linemen. Um, and my daughter got third in the state at her
Wow.
young little age, and my son got first in the state.
Wow.
And both they run the 100 and 200. So there's a
Wow.
different level. There's a different gene pool somewhere in here that they
Oh,
got.
that is wonderful. That's wonderful. Oh, I know you're very busy and I've taken up so much of your time. And I can't thank you. Hopefully you'll come back sometime. We can ask some different questions, but thank you so much. I appreciate it. Until next time on Team Meeting, you're more valuable beyond sports because of sports. Thanks, Albert. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.